Hello once again, it's Joe the CRM chap here, and we're back with a new video in my series all about Microsoft exam PL-400. This is the developers exam for the Power Platform that is aimed towards those who are building solutions on top of or are indeed extending out the Power Platform. So in today's video we're going to take a look at Power Apps Component Framework Controls, sometimes or often referred to as Pcf Controls. Now these are a really great tool that we as developers can build out to be able to completely modify the appearance of our model-driven or canvas apps. We can completely change the experience, introduce a whole new user interface potentially as part of that, bind these to particular controls or attributes within our Dataverse or within our app, and really sort of do things that were previously impossible from an interface standpoint. So what we're going to do today is we're going to build out a sample PCF control from start to finish. Now because this is something that we need to write code for, we're not going to be starting off first of all within the Maker portal. We instead need to make sure that we have got some tools already installed on our local desktop. So specifically, you're going to need Visual Studio Code, you're going to need the Power Apps CLI, and there's other various different requirements as well, which I'll put a link to in the comments so that you can obviously go off and install those first. Assuming that's all been done, what I want to do first of all is open up the Visual Studio developer prompt on my machine. So I'm just going to, it's called the developer command prompt. So if I just go to the search down here, you can see developer command prompt Visual Studio 2019. I'm going to move this onto my screen. I'm working within the D directory on my particular machine, so I'm just going to scope myself into there. Then I'm just going to do a quick CD into a folder that's on this particular drive. Now if we were to take a look at this in our folder explorer, we can see we've got an existing folder in there which we're not going to pay too much mind to. First things first, we need to create a new folder in there that we're going to work in. So I'm just going to call this, I'm just going to do the make dir command or mkdir command. I'm just going to call this sample. As you can see, that folder now exists in there. I'm just going to do a quick CD into there, like so. And now that I'm within there, we need to effectively initialize this folder for our PCF project that we want to create. And we do this by running a specific command from the CLI. So it's pack PCF init, and we need to give this sort of two commands: namespace. Well, I'm just going to use my initials for this particular example, and then going to give this a name of PL-400 sample. We also need to define what type of project template we want to set up, and there's effectively two types at the moment. There's field or dataset. Because we wanted to create a sort of field-based component today, that's the option we're going to choose. So I'm just going to type that in, hit return. It's going to set up the folder ready to go. I now need to run the npm install command, which will then install the various different dependencies that we're going to need for this particular project. So npm install, and we'll just give that a few moments just to run. So that's now completed successfully, and now what we can do is, because we've got Visual Studio Code installed on this particular machine, I can then just run the following sort of command here, which will be code with a full stop, like so. And that's going to open up Visual Studio Code for me in another window with that particular folder in there. So we can see now we've got quite a bit of stuff in this particular folder down here. We've got some various different files down here regarding the project and things like that. And then we've got it within the PL-400 sample folder an initialized control that's ready to go. So when we create the project for the first time, there's two things that we get. Index.ts, which is effectively our scaffolding for the control. So this is a TypeScript file, and we need to effectively use this to populate out the various logic that we want our control to do. And we get some helpful hints on each of the different functions in here to sort of help us along on that. Second of all is we've got the control manifest. Now this is what defines the various properties and the settings relating to this particular control. So things like, such as for example its name, the type of properties that it's bound to in the particular Power App, what resources it uses. So we can see, for example, we've got the index.ts on there, but if we wanted to, we could add in, let's say, CSS files or a regex file as an example. And then also the ability of being able to then enable specific features. So for example, we can see down here, we can enable the web API and access some various methods relating to that within our Power Apps control. That's what we get to start off with. So now we want to proceed with building out our particular control, and what we're going to do today is just a very basic example. We're going to build out a React-based text field control that we can bind to an existing text field in a model-driven app, and we're going to use what's called the Fluent UI to help us with that. The Fluent UI is effectively a set of controls and components that Microsoft make available to developers. And they help us in both in sort of having being able to brand and create different components very easily without having to worry about design and stuff like that. But also more crucially, when we're building for model-driven apps, helps us to make sure that the controls we develop sort of adapt the look and feel of how a model-driven app looks by default. So it's a really great tool to use. What I typically say to people is that whereas before I started using Fluent UI for PCF development, it was the equivalent of me having developing sort of children's doodles for my Pcf controls. Basically, they looked rubbish. As soon as I switched across to using Fluent UI, it sort of I looked like a Picasso sort of overnight without really much effort involved. So I really would encourage you to take a look at Fluent UI and use it as much as possible when building your controls. So to start off with, we need to make just a small change in our particular manifest that we've got on here. We want to basically just modify the name descriptions of our particular display name description keys of our particular property that we've got on here. So I'm just going to call this text field as an example, and then we'll rename this to text field to bind to in Dataverse. Then we'll save that like so. We need to run some npm commands to be able to start building out our React-based components. So I'm going to switch back to the developer prompt like so. I'm going to run these commands on here. I'm going to do npm install react, react DOM, and Office UI Fabric React. So this is going to install these three packages in order. So we'll just give that a second just to run. Next, I want to run additional command to install a type file on here, just to make sure that we don't get any errors as we're building out our control effectively. It just gives us a local set of types that will make sure that TypeScript doesn't complain correctly. So again, just let that run for a few moments, and then we will. Yep, that's all installed. Now we can sort of minimize that for now. We go back into Visual Studio Code. I'm just going to add in a new TSX file. I'm going to call this text field sample.tsx. And this is where we're going to have the sort of the main logic for our particular component. So I'm going to be sort of just copying and pasting in, just obviously the focus of this video is more on showing you how to build and deploy a Pcf control rather than sort of going into the inner workings of TypeScript. So we're just going to copy and paste across an existing one that's been built out, and I'll sort of explain what we're doing as we're going along. So first of all, we need to have a couple of import statements at the very top. So these work similar to sort of, let's say, C# or Java in terms of, okay, giving us some modules that we can import in. I need to define some interfaces. So React has this concept of both state, and you've also got properties as well for your control. So we need some interfaces defined in there that build that out for us. And then next, I'm going to copy and paste in a class that contains all of the logic needed to basically render a text field. So it's going to take an existing text field and its value from the application. It's going to render it, and it's also going to include a sort of a label on here as well. My awesome text field is a label. And within this, we've got the various different logic that sort of handles the rendering of that, changing it and making sure that that change is detected and then fed back into the application, so that when the user hits the save button, it accepts that value and puts it into the Dataverse database. So that's looking okay now as our TSX file. So I'm going to go into the index.ts now. And there's a few little changes we need to make to this. We need to just import it in, add in some additional imports at the top. So again, we're going to import in our React and React DOM. And I'm also just going to import in the text field sample class that is within our TSX file, like so. There are some private sort of variables that we need to define at the very top, which control some behavior of the application as it sort of renders. The init function down here typically will contain the code that's needed to sort of effectively just put up the scaffolding for the control for the first time. So in this case, what we want to just do is add in some code that's going to create us a HTML div element that we're going to use to populate in our control when it's ready to go. Now, that's what you would typically use init for, and then update view. So any time where you're sort of working with actual data or need to update data, this is where you should be typically putting your logic within there, not within init necessarily. So we need to put in some code for the update view then to be able to render the data. So I'm just going to put this in like so. So all we're doing is just preparing getting the data from the input parameter and just feeding that through into the control to render it out correctly. I need to add in just a little function that's going to pass in, that's going to handle when a change occurs. So therefore, whenever it sort of is modified in this area on here, we need to make sure that the control recognizes that and then passes that back as that attribute change back in, so that we can then hit the save button and then the record goes in just fine. So that function handles that down there. A big thanks to David Rivard, who has got some really great sample controls on there, which again I'll link to in the comments on there, for sort of he's done some work in terms of building out these various components, and this function is sort of adapted from a Pcf control that he's built out. So really useful stuff, and he's done some really great stuff around Pcf controls as well, so definitely worth checking out. So we've got that function there, update view is populated. Now we just need to add in the following lines into get outputs like so, and this is where we're just effectively, as I said a few seconds ago, passing back any changes that are made to the text field back into Dataverse, and then detecting that as a change, so that when the user saves it, it all goes through really nicely from there. So that's all looking okay now, I think, unless I've forgotten something, which could be likely. So what I just want to do very quickly is I'll just run npm run build very quickly, just to make sure that everything builds correctly, which it should do. Just give that a few moments just to run. Okay, that's looking good. So typically when you first built out your component locally, you may want to sort of just give it, debug it around a little bit first, just to make sure it's working as intended. The great thing about Pcf Controls is that we can actually do this really straightforwardly. All we have to do is just run the following command, npm start watch, and it's going to open up a sort of a local test harness for us, where we can sort of experiment and test around further with our control. So just give that a second just to load up. We should get something open up in our browser, which it has done in my other screens. Let me just drag this over like so. So we can see now that this is an area where we can test out the component. I can modify about with the size of the window on here. So if I wanted to test different form factors to see how the control looks, I can do that very straightforwardly. I can put in my sample data inputs. So for example, I can maybe just do, okay, PCF is great as an example, and the control on there should update automatically, although in this case, maybe a slight bug on there, but it's not going to prevent us from doing that. But in terms of the control itself, it looks to be working. Because we're in test harness mode, I can actually make modifications to the code and see them sort of reflected straight away. So if I wanted to say, let's say, call this my awesome text attribute instead, I can just hit save on that, make that change, and then if I go back into my control, we can see that change has been reflected straight away, which is really great. So this is a really great tool for you to use to just, have a bit of a sanity check on your components before you push them out. So at this point I'm happy that this is working as I wanted to, so let's get it deployed out into my Dataverse environment so we can sort of experiment further and obviously confirm that it works as expected. So I'm just going to close that down. I'm just going to hit Control-C on here just to end the debugging session like so. And now there's a few things I need to do to get the component ready to deploy out into Dataverse. I need to effectively create a solution project that's going to bundle that up for me and then allow me to connect up and deploy this component out. So first of all, I'm just going to change my directory on here to the particular folder that we're working in for the control. So sorry, just give me a second. I'm just copying across from another screen. I think that should be correct. Let me just get rid of that. Okay, I'm going to create in here a new folder using mkdir command again. So just going to call that solutions. And now I'm going to run another set of PowerApp CLL commandlets. I'm going to run pack solution init. I'm going to need to give this a publisher name, which we're just going to call JJG, and a publisher prefix, which again I'll just use my initials on that. Obviously, just adapt these for your particular needs of the scenario. So that's all been created. Now I need to add a reference to the particular to the solution or the PowerApps component framework project that we just created. So I'm just going to copy and paste this command into here. So it's pack solution add reference, then you give it the path to the particular control. And I think I've made just a slight mistake on there, so let me just check. This should be the folder. No, sorry, this is the sample from earlier. Let me just go back onto here. Okay, let's try this one instead. Is it this folder instead? Let me try that one. Okay, sorry, yeah, I had the wrong folder path there. So, yeah, so it's basically just the root folder that we created earlier, the sample folder that the reference path needs to be. Now, I just want to run 2 msbuild commands just to verify that it all sort of bundles up correctly. So we'll just give that a second just to load. That's run successfully, and then I'm just going to run a normal msbuild command like so. Then everything should be good and ready to go once that finishes. Okay, looking good. So with that created, we've now got, if we were to sort of inspect our folder, we should see that we've got a solution within our, if I go back up to, where's it gone? Might be in the out folder, is it controls, PL-400 sample. Where's it gone? It's a sample, PL-400 sample, bin, debug. Yeah, there we go. So we've got a solution file in there. This is a Dataverse solution file that we could just straightforwardly import into our environment, but the steps involved there can be a little bit manual and a little bit sort of break you from your development flow. So what we can actually do instead is push out the solution file using our developer command prompt instead. There's a few things we need to do first of all. So we need to run a command that gets us connected up to our particular Dataverse environment. So if I was to check at the moment, I've already got a connection set up for my particular environment. So I've set this up earlier, so I am good to go. If, however, I was connecting for the very first time, this is the command here that I would run, pack auth create. Then I'd give the URL for the environment, and then hit return. You'll get an interactive login prompt that you can log into, and then from there the connection will be ready to go. So that's all set up and ready to go for me. At any point I can just run pack auth who just to confirm that I am indeed talking to the correct environment, so that I don't, let's say, accidentally push things out to production or another downstream environment, let's say. And then now I can run a command just to get this pushed out into the environment. So I'm just going to do pack pcf push. It's going to be publisher prefix jjg for that one. Oops, I forgot a cd, so let me just run a cd command on there. So that'll be, I need to be in the root folder again. So this will be, this will be this one here. So let's just change to cd into there instead. Run the command again. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, so you just sometimes need to make sure you're in the correct folders when you're running these commands, and just pay attention to how the structure works on it, just to make sure that you are not in the wrong area. But now what this is going to do is going to take that solution file that we've already built out, it's going to deploy that out into the environment, and this will typically take just a few minutes to complete. So let's give that a moment just to run to completion. So when it's complete, we then get a notification to say it's already in there. And if we now return to the Dataverse environment from earlier, go into solutions, we can see we've got a new solution here called Power Apps Tools with that prefix that we set up a few moments ago. We can see there's our custom control all set up, ready to go. So let's get this added onto our account form as an example, and see how that all renders out and looks in the application. So I'm going to go into the PL-400 demo solution that's been built out in the previous videos. First of all, I just want to make sure that my control has been added into my project, so that I don't forget in future when we're looking to deploy this out. So there it is there, just going to add that in like so. Go to the account table, click on forms, go into the account form. And I'm going to want to jump into Classic to be able to set this up. Although they are generally bringing the experience into the new Maker portal, and you can do some stuff with controls in the Maker portal, generally it's better sometimes just to go out into Classic to be able to do what you need to do involving Pcf Controls. So we'll just open that up into Classic. Whilst I'm waiting, I'm just going to get another tab open and ready to go with our app, so that we can test everything once it's been deployed out, or added on I should say. So we want to add the control to a particular column within our form, so we're just going to choose as an example the account form. I'm going to click on it, I'm going to click on controls at the end, and we can see it's got the default control enabled for it, but I can then just click on this button down here, add control. If I scroll down, I should see PL-400 sample control down here, which I can click add on. And because this is a bound property that we set up for it, it automatically populates with the name attribute on there, and we can't actually change that at all. So if you did have some other properties where you could have static values, then you could also click on and edit them as well if you wanted to. The only thing we just need to do now is we want to make sure this has been this works in the web interface, so we have to make sure this radio button is built down there. With that done, I can press on OK, click on Save, hit the Publish icon. Then now, if I go into my model-driven app, so I'm just going to open up the App Explorer window at the top, go into PL-400 sample app, and then we're just going to find a particular account that we want to work with. So we'll do AdventureWorks Cycles as an example. And we can see that our controllers rendered on there. So we've got my awesome text attribute, that title that we looked at earlier. That's all loaded up just fine on there. And we can give this just a test by just saying, by just changing this, let's say AdventureWorks Manufacturing instead. If I hit on Save like so, return to the view over here, I can see the change has been accepted successfully. And this effectively, from a user standpoint, let me just don't waste on that. From a user standpoint, this provides a seamless experience for them. The one thing we may look at doing is that because we've effectively got duplicate sort of titles on there, I may just go into here. I just want to maybe just not display the label for this control. So again, if I hit on Save and just give that a quick publish, you can see how that looks when we refresh. So I'm just going to do Control F5, to refresh that. And there we go. And that loads in. That's a seamless experience. You know, from a user's standpoint, it's, you know, virtually indistinguishable from what we've got elsewhere in this particular model-driven app. You know, and, you know, we can do, in this case, you know, a very basic change, kind of a pointless control in the sense of, okay, well, we've already got these text inputs that work really well, so why do we want to replace it? But, you know, effectively, you know, what we're showing today is what, you know, the art of the possible in the sense of, okay, well, you know, this may be a simple type control, but when you start getting into it, some of the stuff that you can do with it is pretty, you know, you could take one field and maybe replace it with several text input controls. You know, you could completely change how this particular section looks. There's a whole, you know, blank canvas here that you've got when it comes to working with Pcf controls that can really take them above and beyond this very simple example that we've looked at today. But hopefully what we've been able to do in this video is familiarise yourself with the process of developing a component for the first time, show you the important elements of that are most pertinent from the standpoint of the PL-400 exam, and familiarise yourself with some of the core commands as well, you know, that are within the Power Apps CLI module. So that wraps it up for today. I hope you found this video useful. Please subscribe to the channel if you are enjoying the content or indeed the series. We've got more videos to come as we sort of round up this particular series and look at other topics and subjects within the PL-400 exam. Yeah, so that's great. So take care and thanks for watching. Cheers.